So we're going to get into number one. So of the three things, number one is what is actually covered. Okay, so privacy liability coverage, that comes really down to this. It's like we've talked about in numerous trainings, it's all about the data. Now, breaches in private information, or we like to call it PII, which is personally identifiable information, can be huge. Okay, cannot stress that enough, huge. And the reason I say that is the different countries have various laws. And I'm just, this podcast comes out, there are issues with cybersecurity laws in China and in the United States. Well, they're in flux and they're moving different ways. So you may think that you have a good understanding of how this is going to affect you, but it can change just within a couple weeks. So breaches of private information is a big deal. And like we talk about, it gets very location dependent. Is it state? Is it province? Is it country? They all have different aspects. So if you in the United States, if you go to one state and look up how do they handle PII breaches of information, is different than if you go to another state. And the United States still hasn't figured out what they want to do. And then that's just to complicate things if you start talking Australia, China, anywhere else in the world, France, whatever. You need to also avoid languages that state that you are not covered if failure to protect confidential information regardless of clause. So if it says in there where that you're not covered if you failure to protect confidential information regardless of the clause, watch limiting language when you're dealing with this. So you need to consider what is actually covered from a privacy standpoint, and then avoid some language you need to look at avoiding potentially. Now, what also is covered, depending on regulatory action. So is regulatory actions against you covered? So if you own a business and you have a WordPress site up there, and your regulatory requirements state that you have to send certain information to them, then what ends up happening is and let's just say you're hacked. Well, will that cyber insurance cover you in the event that you don't send it to them like you're supposed to do? So this can get really expensive, especially if you're dealing with the government. Why? They have deep pockets, you don't. So you need to understand what is covered in your policy. Are regulatory actions covered? Some policies may actually require a formal suit, or I do it air quotes, suit to be filed before coverage. So what that basically says is that a formal documentation must be in place before they'll even look at coverage. Again, knowing the fine print behind this. Good to have a lawyer help you with this if you don't have one, and it's good to have, again, a insurance professional who does this for a living help you understand and navigate through all of this. Civil fines, like if you have a local, municipality or local government may have some fines or penalties based on things you may have not complied with. Sometimes, in many cases, these cyber insurance policies may cover that. Also, I noticed there was a bullet when I was doing some research on this that be mindful if an insurance company seeks to exclude this coverage. So you could have it set up where the insurance company says, you don't need that, you'll be okay. You might want to consider, if you are in that space where civil fines could be a potential possibility, you may want to have that level of coverage. Also keep this in mind that since everything is changing so much, you may not know. You may think you understand if there's no civil fines or penalties, but guess what? There might still be. So something for you to consider. Another thing to consider when what is covered is your notification costs. Now, this can get really expensive when you deal with notification costs. And these are the costs associated with notifying all parties of the breach. And this would include public relations, phone banks to basically get people out, advertising. Who needs to know? So you just got a big, massive breach, and now you have to let people know. Does it have to be advertising that has to go out? I've seen some advertisings on TV from going, hey, are you part of this class action lawsuit, or were you affected by this, whatever. See, those kind of things may have to be part of this. So then you ask yourself, with what is covered, why is this so important? Well, it's becoming a huge priority for third parties. And what it comes down to is I've seen this in corporate America, is that you may require your contractors or your third parties that connect into your environment to carry some level of cyber liability insurance. It may be in a contract. You may be small enough to go, this doesn't affect me. And that's true. But when you set up a contract with somebody, do you want them to have some level of insurance so in the event that something happens, you're covered? I don't know. You have to ask yourself that. So just consider the possibilities. If in your business, is it a requirement? It happened with a target breach. I use this as an example. Is right now, the last numbers I had heard is the breach itself caused in effect of $800 million in losses to Target, from the actual remediating the breach to public relations to paying out affected people, so on and so forth. And again, that number is a number that's floated around. I don't know how right it is. It's just gobs of money that will affect it because this heating and air company did not do good practices in securing their information, and then hackers got in through the heating and air company into Target and then leveraged what they could in Target. And so it affected that heating and air company affected Target dramatically. It's also what is important is this may possibly, again, air quotes, possibly help reduce judgment if you're breached. Now, what I mean by this is this: are you doing your due diligence? So you go, hey, I've got security, check. Okay, I did a good job with that. I've got insurance, check. Okay, great. I'm protecting my clients and I'm protecting myself. And then you go to court and you're protected, right? Maybe, right? So again, this just comes down to this helps in your favor if anything were to go to a civil situation. Doesn't mean it's going to protect you 100%. No, not at all. I'm not saying that. But what it will do is it can help you potentially in the event that you're doing the right things to protect you and your client's data. That has some merit. It's better than saying, I'm not going to worry about it. No big deal. So just something to consider.